A cold wind whipped across the dark streets of Portland, Oregon, the kind that scratched at the bones and made the night feel far lonelier than it should. On a nearly empty sidewalk beneath a flickering street lamp, a woman lay crumpled beside her wheelchair, her breath trembling in quick, frightened bursts as a yellow taxi sped away, splashing icy rainwater across her legs. Her fingers curled weakly around the metal frame of her chair, but she didn't have the strength to lift herself. The world blurred as tears burned her eyes. She felt invisible, discarded, forgotten by a city that never slowed down for people like her. And as the red taillights of the taxi disappeared, she whispered into the broken night, wondering how much more she could take. Before continuing, if you believe in kindness, compassion, and second chances, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support truly helps stories like this reach more hearts. Her name was Emily Carter, a 32-year-old graphic designer who had lived with severe mobility issues since a spinal injury 5 years earlier. Life had not been easy since the accident that took her independence, her engagement, and much of who she used to be. She fought every day to hold on to hope, but some days, the days like tonight, felt impossibly heavy. She had left work late, exhausted after a week of deadlines, only to find that the accessible bus ramp was out of service again. So she called a taxi, and at first everything had seemed fine. But then the driver grumbled about how long it was taking her to get in, rolled his eyes, muttered under his breath about people like you, and finally snapped that he couldn't deal with this tonight. Before she even knew what was happening, he yanked her bag from the seat, dropped it on the ground, and demanded she get out. She pleaded that she just needed a ride home, that she had already paid. But he didn't care. He shoved her wheelchair toward her, slammed the door, and sped off. And now here she was, unable to get up, the cold seeping deep into her skin as the rain turned heavier. She couldn't reach her phone. It had fallen into a puddle and flickered uselessly. She tried again to pull herself up, but pain surged down her back, sharp and unforgiving. Panic clawed at her chest. Cars passed, their headlights sweeping over her before speeding away. People hurried down the opposite sidewalk, choosing not to see her. She pressed a trembling hand to her forehead, feeling shame flood through her, even though she had done nothing wrong. She was always trying not to be a burden, always trying not to inconvenience anyone. And yet somehow she still ended up here, alone, cold, struggling, with no one willing to stop. At the same time, across the street, Daniel Reed, a 38-year-old single father, was driving his aging Honda toward home after picking up his 8-year-old daughter Lily from his sister's house. Daniel was no stranger to hard nights. Life had not been gentle with him either. He had lost his wife to cancer 4 years earlier, and ever since, he had been balancing two jobs, construction during the day and grocery store stocking at night, just to keep a roof over their heads. Every time he looked at Lily in the rearview mirror, sleeping peacefully after a long day at school, he reminded himself that no matter how tired he felt, giving up was never an option. She depended on him. She was his world. The car heater hummed softly, warming his stiff fingers, and fatigue pressed heavily on his eyelids. He was ready to go home, eat whatever leftovers he could find, tuck Lily into bed, and collapse. But as he approached the next intersection, something unusual caught his attention. A shape sprawled near a wheelchair, half in the shadows, half illuminated by a trembling street lamp. At first he thought it might be trash, or maybe someone simply resting. But then he noticed a hand weakly lifting, falling back, and a cold spark of alarm shot through him. He slowed the car, then he stopped. A silent battle played in his chest. He was tired. He had his young daughter in the back. It was late. The safest, simplest thing to do would be to drive away like everyone else. But something inside him, maybe the echo of all the nights he wished someone had helped his wife, maybe the memory of how it felt to face the world alone, refused to let him ignore what he saw. He parked, turned on his emergency lights, and stepped out quietly. The rain hit his face in cold needles, but he barely noticed. When he got closer, he saw her, shivering, frightened, soaked through, unable to lift herself from the ground. His heart clenched. Emily heard footsteps and flinched, half expecting more cruelty. But when she looked up and saw a gentle-eyed man kneeling beside her, everything inside her cracked open at once. Daniel asked if she was hurt, if she could move, and Emily tried to explain, her voice small and shaking. She told him about the taxi, the fall, her phone. Daniel felt anger flare in his chest, not at her, but at the way the world treated people who were already fighting so much. He had seen enough unfairness in life. He didn't need to see more. He carefully helped her sit up, checked that nothing was broken, and then with patient, steady movements, lifted her back into her wheelchair. His arms strained, but he didn't show it. He just kept reassuring her that she was safe and that he wasn't going anywhere. When she asked, embarrassed, whether he could perhaps call her another ride, he looked around at the empty streets and, shaking his head gently, insisted on taking her home himself. She hesitated. She didn't want to impose on anyone. But she could see sincerity etched across his features, a warmth in his voice she rarely heard from strangers. She finally agreed. He introduced her to Lily, who had woken up quietly and was rubbing her eyes as she watched the grown-ups. The little girl smiled at Emily with the kind of effortless compassion children naturally possess, and for a moment, Emily's heart softened. Daniel secured the wheelchair in the trunk, helped her into the front seat, and draped his own jacket over her soaked shoulders, despite the cold settling into his bones. The three of them rode through the night, the soft hum of the engine and the rhythmic tap of rain against the windows filling the silence. Emily told him her address. Daniel drove carefully, glancing at her occasionally, making sure she was okay. As the car warmed her skin, the shock of the night began melting into exhaustion. But beneath that exhaustion, something else, something unfamiliar, began to stir. Gratitude, safety, human kindness. It felt fragile, like something she wasn't sure she deserved, yet deeply needed. They talked softly. Emily shared pieces of her life, how the injury had taken so much from her, how she had lost friends, opportunities, confidence, how she was still trying to rebuild. Daniel spoke about Lily, about his wife, about the lonely nights and the small victories that kept him going. In that quiet car, two people who had been carrying invisible burdens suddenly recognized pieces of themselves in each other. When they reached Emily's apartment building, Daniel didn't simply drop her off. He parked, retrieved her wheelchair, and helped her all the way to her door, guiding her over the cracked pavement, through the small ramp, and into the hallway. Lily walked beside them, holding Emily's bag like a helper on a mission. Inside her apartment, Emily looked around. Quiet, empty, dim. She realized how long it had been since anyone had stepped foot inside. She felt vulnerable, but not in a frightening way. In a human way. In a way that reminded her she wasn't meant to survive this life alone. Before Daniel left, she thanked him with a quivering voice, struggling not to cry. He simply smiled, told her to reach out if she ever needed help, and gently reminded her that needing help didn't make her weak. Those words lingered in the air long after he and Lily disappeared down the hall, but the story didn't end there. 2 days later, Daniel received a call. Emily's supervisor explained that she hadn't shown up to work and wasn't answering her phone. Daniel felt worry rise instantly. He didn't know her well, but something in his gut told him she might be struggling. He asked Lily if she'd like to check on Miss Emily, and the little girl nodded eagerly. They drove over again, carrying a small bag of groceries. Daniel knocked on the door. No answer. He hesitated, then knocked again. After a moment, he heard faint movement. The door unlocked slowly, revealing Emily looking pale, exhausted, and distant. Her apartment was dim. She hadn't eaten much since the incident. Her back pain had worsened, and emotionally, she felt her world collapsing. When she saw them standing there, the single dad with worried eyes, the small girl holding a bag of apples, her resolve shattered. She began to cry, quietly at first, then harder as Daniel stepped inside and simply held her, letting her grief spill freely. He didn't rush her, didn't tell her to be strong. He just stayed. And in that moment, she realized no one had ever given her that kind of space before. The days that followed brought small changes. Daniel visited more, sometimes bringing dinner, sometimes just stopping by to say hello after work. Lily began drawing pictures for Emily, bright little sketches of sunshine and flowers and people smiling. Emily found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done in a long time. Daniel repaired the loose cabinet door in her kitchen, changed the light bulb she couldn't reach, tightened the screws on her wheelchair, and helped her build a schedule that made her days easier. He never acted like she was a burden. He never made her feel ashamed. He simply cared naturally, without expecting anything in return. And slowly, Emily began to rebuild.